Uh, Welcome everyone this morning for next session under Environment Week, which we are carrying out in collaboration with SECON Tamil Nadu. Uh, First of all, I apologize to all the participants for change in the platform from Zoom to Meet due to some technical trouble. Sorry that we wasted a little valuable time. But now I think we can continue with this, and we will also do the screen recording for this. We are having fantastic sessions right from day one, and now today we are having interesting session on one of the ecosystems, which is of coastal nature, having rocky pool ecosystem, a special on its own. And we have with us Purnima Mohite madam to speak on this special ecosystem. Yeah. So we go ahead with our session. I request our principal, Dr. Panse madam, to address the gathering. Over to you, Panse ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much, my dear students. A very good morning to you all. And I'm happy that today we are on the fourth day, and we are, as you all are aware, that we are celebrating our Environment Week. And under the heading, Only One Earth, today we have another interesting topic here, rocky pools. Madam, all these days we have some topic or another. We had a speaker speaking on climate and mountaineering. We had yesterday talk on life under earth. Today you're going to talk about rocky pools, and I mean, it's amazing to see different parts of the environment. And to just give you a brief idea about our college, we are a 60-year-old institute. We have got all the three faculties: art, science, commerce, right from 11th standard to PhD. And zoology department is active department headed by Dr. Vaishali Somni. And in zoology, we have got MSc zoology with specialization oceanography. And we have PhD also, and about 10 students are enrolled for PhD in MD college. And since our specialization is oceanography, your topic is going to be of lot of interest to our students, because there is another world in this rocky pools. And whenever we go out for an field visit to coastal areas, it is really amazing to see these wonderful creatures in the rock pool, right from nereis to the gastropods, different gastropods, the sea anemones, and the children get super excited. And surely now to listen to you is going to be really wonderful. And on behalf of Maharishi Dayanand College and SACON, I welcome you. We are also celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and there we have Women of Matter. So we have decided before 15th August, we have to complete talks of 75 women working in the field of environment. And we are very lucky to have you here, and welcome you once again to our institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Panse madam. We are having this Women of Matter talk series so that our children and all the participants, the students, they get opportunity to interact with the senior scientists, senior teachers, as well as young researchers who are working in field of environment. Now I would request Suprita madam to formally introduce today's speaker, Purnima madam. Over to you, Suprita madam.
Thank you, madam. I take this opportunity to introduce you all to our today's speaker, madam, Ms. Purnima Mohite, who has grown up in the Konkan region of Maharashtra. She has graduated from the College of Forestry, Konkan Rishi Vidyapeeth, Dapoli, Ratnagiri, and is a gold medalist. During her graduation, her interest in ornithology increased due to the encouragement of teachers and colleagues. Subsequently, she has done an undergraduate project on shorebirds and presented the work at a national conference, participated in a week-long volunteer patrolling program arranged by Maharashtra Forest Department and Wildlife Club at Bhima Shankar Wildlife Sanctuary, and assisted in the field work of a PhD fellow of TIFR NCB Bangalore. She did her master's in ornithology and conservation biology from SECON, which is the first MSc batch, and has received complete fellowship from WWF India. Her MSc dissertation was on ecology of rocky tide pools. The tide pools are unique and have received very little attention in India. Her passion to water also comes from the fact that she is a sea swimmer. Today, she will introduce you all to rocky tide pool ecosystem and also share some insights from her research work. We welcome you, Purnima Madam, for our today's session, and over to you, Purnima Madam. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And thanks for inviting me for this talk. I will share my screen.
Purnima Madam, stage is all yours. Can you share your screen and start the presentation, please? Madam, can you make it slideshow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, we can see the entire slide. Yeah, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I am grateful to Maharshi Dayanand College for providing me this opportunity to share my views about rocky tide pool ecosystem. So before talking about rocky tide pool ecosystem, I would like to give some information about coastal zone and intertidal region. The coastal zone is a transition between terrestrial ecosystem and marine ecosystem. This narrow region of Earth is most diverse, complex, and productive, and similarly very valued ecosystem. Various kinds of plant forms and habitats are present in this region, such as rocky shore, sandy shore, mangroves, and mudflats. And the region of these landforms, which is under the influence of tidal cycle, is known as intertidal region. The intertidal region can be briefly defined as the region of interaction between land, water, and air. And the boundary of intertidal region is marked by the high water level of high tide and water level of low tide. This intertidal region gets submerged during high tide and it exposes during low tide. Hence, organisms living in this intertidal region experience harsh environmental conditions. The intertidal region of rocky shores is exposed to harsh wave action. Hence, the rocks and boulders turns into rocky cliffs, rocky platforms, and it develops many cracks and crevices. And similarly, many tide pools are formed on the rocky intertidal region, which provides habitat for many marine organisms. Hence, intertidal region of rocky shore is more diverse. Due to regular submergence, each high tide brings recruitment stock, that is eggs and larvae from near shore area, but their survival is determined by the environmental stress such as temperature, exposure to air, and wave action. Hence, this rocky tide pool or rocky intertidal region is very dynamic ecosystem and has a low durational stability. Based on the exposure, the rocky intertidal region can be divided into 3 zones: high tide zone, mid tide zone, and low tide zone. Each zone has specific boundary and has a unique component of organisms. So, high tide zone is demarcated by the high water of spring tide, and its lower boundary is demarcated by high tide of neap tide. This region gets completely submerged during the spring tide, and it is mostly exposed to the sunlight and air during day and night. The characteristic organisms present in this region are periwinkles and lichens. The next zone is mid tide zone. This zone is the boundary of this zone is demarcated by high water of neap tide and low water of neap tide. This region daily undergoes under the submergence and exposes daily, and the characteristic organism present in this region are barnacles. The lowest zone is low tide zone. This zone is rarely exposed to the earth and and rarely dries off. And this region is most diverse among the three zones, that is high tide zone, mid tide zone, and low tide zone. And many organisms are present in this region due to daily wave action. These organisms develop various adaptation to withstand high wave action. So this is one of the photo from my field site. Here I have roughly demarcated the low tide region, mid tide region, and high tide region. So in low tide region, you can see the algal growth is there and some wet area is there. Mid tide, you can see the rocks are covered with barnacles, but in high tide region, you can see the rocks are bare and it is dry. Here in mid tide region, you can see the water is accumulated. So such accumulated water in a depression, we call it as tide pool. So the definition, tide pools can be defined as the accumulation of seawater in a depression present on an ocean's intertidal region during low tide. Tide pools are of two types, sandy tide pools and rocky tide pools. Sandy tide pools are temporary in nature. Their shape and size, depth changes frequently in a year, but rocky tide pools are permanent in nature. Their size and shape is fixed. Tide pools are formed by erosion action of waves. They are usually formed when a boulder lodges in a depression on a rocky intertidal region and grinds the hollow because it rolls around in the waves. After some time, the depression becomes deep enough to hold water during low tide. If the boulder stays in a pool, it will gradually grind the pool deeper, but sometimes big wave washes the boulder away and the tide pool remains shallow. This is how tide pools are formed. This is the typical structure of tide pool. You can see the three different habitats in a single tide pool. One is the sandy region where benthic organisms like polychaetes and starfish can be observed. Then the second habitat is water, where the floating organisms like planktons, fishes, shrimps, various crustaceans are observed. And the third habitat is the rocky surface, where the sedentary organisms like limpets, sea anemones, algae, and periwinkles are observed. So here in this picture, you can see that during the low tide, tide pools can be observed and they can be easily accessed. Each tide pool has different size and shape, and hence each is unique from another. These are the tide pools, and the open the exposed rocky surface here you can see is known as the emergent substrata. So similar to the emergent substrata, the tide pools are also influenced by tidal cycle, but to the lower extent, because the water gives buffer to the organisms present inside the tide pool and provides less fluctuation in sunlight and water temperature. Tide pools also provide refuge, act as a refuge, feeding ground, and nursery ground for many marine organisms. Hence, tide pools are called as one of the taxon-rich habitat on the rocky intertidal region. The distribution and diversity of organisms is determined by various physical factors such as temperature, sunlight, chemical factors such as pH, salinity, and various nutrients, and biological factors such as predation, grazing, etc. So, in a small tide pool, you can observe many food chains and food webs. Hence, tide pools can be used as proxies for complex food web studies, which are rather difficult due to logistic limitations. So, here is the video which I have recorded. I will play. You can see the sea anemones. Here you can see a fish. So tide pools are acting as refuge and they are giving protection from predation to these fishes. So though the tide pools are very ubiquitously present on the rocky intertidal region, but they are very poorly studied than that of the emergent substrata. The international studies have shown that the community composition and structure of rocky tide pools is determined by water temperature of pools, salinity, area, and depth of tide pool. And the studies have also shown that the tide pool biota changes from low tide to high tide. In India, very few studies have been conducted exclusively on tide pool in India, though there are some mentions about the tide pool while studying the rocky intertidal region. The first probable study is done by Parulekar, where he has mentioned about tide pools and he has enlisted the species occurring in tide pool and recorded that tide pools are most diverse habitat than the present on the rocky intertidal region. The other three studies are one of the studies from Goa, where total 9 fishes were observed in 10 tide pools from the 2 rocky shores of Goa. Then one of the study which was conducted by Sukamaran on Colaba region of Mumbai after Chitra oil spill. In that study, it was observed that after oil spill, the tide pool biota was adversely affected, but after few months, it started replenishing to its original nature. And the third study, which was conducted in the Andaman, found that the water temperature influenced the assemblage of ornamental fishes in tide pools of Andaman. So, while considering all these factors, that is, not much study has been done on the tide pools. So, I decided to work on tide pool for my dissertation. Sorry. The objective of my study was to compare the community composition and structure of sedentary organisms present in the tide pools in different intertidal zones as well as shores. And considering this objective in mind, I tried to answer 3 questions. How do physical and chemical factors affect the biodiversity of tide pools? What is the distribution pattern of organisms within low tide zone, mid tide zone, and high tide zone? And does anthropogenic disturbance have any effect on their composition or not? So before selecting my site, I conducted pilot survey in Dapoli Taluka of Ratnagiri and Sindhudurga Taluka, Malvan Taluka of Sindhudurga. And after pilot study, I selected 2 sites, Paspandari Shore and Ladgar Shore in Dapoli Taluka, Ratnagiri. The Ladgar village is a village located slightly away from the rocky intertidal region of Ladgar. It has very less population density, 3 people per hectare, and villagers are mostly engaged in agriculture and tourism. The rocky intertidal region of Ladgar has a length of 700 meters and average width is 150 meters. During on New Moon Day and Full Moon Day, very few people come there to collect gastropod for their consumption. This pool is relatively less disturbed by anthropogenic activity. As you can see here in this picture, there is no plastic or no human footprints are there. And the next site is Paspandari Rocky Intertidal Region. Here in this picture, you can see the village is located along the Rocky Intertidal Region, and the human population density is very high, 102 people per hectare. And most of the people are engaged in fishing activities. One of the major fish landing site of Ratnagiri, Harane, is located 2 kilometers away from this. So I used this site as a disturbed site, anthropogenically disturbed site, because the rocky intertidal region is used by villagers for many activities such as drying of fish, clothes, dumping of kitchen waste. Local people collect the gastropods for their consumption, and the same rocky patch is used for open defecation by villagers. So here I would like to share one experience. initially, me and my sister conducted a pilot survey in Dapoli Taluka on many intertidal rocky beaches, but I did not have any problem. But when I visited the Paspandari rocky region, the people started shouting at us. So we didn't know what happened. Then people said the rock patch which we were going is used by females for their edification. So then luckily Golden Sir was there with me. So he explained what about our research topic, and after understanding it, they were very very welcoming, and I made friends with local girls over there, which used to help me during each my sampling on my sampling day, as I had to collect much data and carry many equipments. Their help was very welcoming. This dissertation, this study helped me how to tackle such kind of situations and how to interact with local people and how to manage the time and resources. And also I understood that any conservation activity is impossible without inclusion and cooperation of local community. So these are those local girls which helped me a lot during my sampling. So study design. After selecting 2 beaches, I divided each beach into 3 zones: high tide zone, mid tide zone, and low tide zone. In each zone, I selected 3 tide pools, and each was marked with oil paint and GPS location was recorded. Each tide pool was measured for surface area and pool depth. The study was conducted once in a month, one day before the full moon day and one day after the full moon day, from January to March of 2020. For sampling, I randomly picked 1 meter by 1 meter grid in each tide pool, from where I collected water sample and benthos sample. Water sample was used to assess the parameters such as temperature, pH, salinity, dissolved oxygen, sodium, calcium, and potassium. For gastropod sampling, I counted the number of individuals present in a 1 meter by 1 meter grid, and I photographed them for the further identification. The benthos sampling was done by using a grab of 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter. The grab sample was then sieved, and then the sample was fixed and preserved by adding rose Bengal solution and 10% formaldehyde. And the specimens were identified up to family level, and their abundance was expressed as number of individuals per meter square. For statistical analysis, a 2-step approach was followed. In the first step, analysis was done at higher taxonomic level, where the abundance, richness, and diversity of Polychaeta, gastropod, amphipod, and sea animals were calculated and were correlated with physicochemical parameters. And in the second step, the Polychaeta and gastropods were identified up to family level, and their richness and abundance were correlated with physicochemical parameters. So the physicochemical parameters results showed that the air temperature and water temperature both was higher on Paspandari shore than that of Ladgar shore. The pools of Ladgar shore were more had larger area and depth was more, but the pools of Paspandari shore were shallower and of smaller size. The other chemical parameters of water were like dissolved oxygen, pH, salinity, sodium, calcium, and potassium were higher on Paspandari shore than that of the Ladgar shore. So during the study, I recorded 4 macrobenthos taxa: Actinaria, Polychaeta, Gastropod, and Amphipoda. Among those, Polychaeta was the dominating, followed by Amphipoda, Gastropod, and Actinaria. The average abundance of macrobenthos on both the shores was 1271 number of individuals per meter square, and the abundance was more on Ladgar shore than that of the Paspandari shore. Here in this bar graph, you can see the diversity of macrobenthos is decreasing from low tide zone to high tide zone on both the shores. This blue are indicating the Ladgar and orange are Paspandari shore. only for polychaeta and gastropods, I identified them up to family level. So total 13 families of polychaetes were observed, and out of those, 6 families were recorded on Ladgar shore and 11 were recorded on Paspandari shore. For gastropods, total 12 families were recorded, and Ladgar, out of those, 20 were observed on Ladgar shore and only 10 were observed on Paspandari shore. The correlation analysis showed the positive relationship between tide pool depth and surface area with macrobenthic and polychaete abundance and gastropod diversity respectively. This is because the pool depth provides extra habitat dimension to pool area and increases water volume, which eventually increases habitat availability. And in addition to this, the depth increases the survival of tide pool fauna by minimizing daily fluctuations, which cause daily fluctuations in temperature and desiccation. The negative correlation was observed between air temperature and pH and then that of benthos, polychaetes, and gastropod abundance. This could be because these marine organisms have specific range of temperature and pH within which they can survive. Hence, the slight increase and decrease in air temperature could have affected them negatively. Tide pool biodiversity, the decreasing trend was observed from low tide to high tide region. Though no negative impact of anthropogenic activities could be ascertained statistically, but we could see the variation on both the shores. There is a serious gap with respect to the tide pool studies, especially in India, and long time studies are necessary to conduct so that tide pools can be managed effectively. And the tide pools can be used to test various ecological models and theories such as island biogeography. So, nevertheless, this study was the first attempt to document the difference in the faunal composition in tide pools on different shores and within the different tidal zones. This study can be used as base for further tide pool studies and for comparison with further studies. Thank you.
Yeah, very nice study indeed. Congratulations, Purnima madam.
Thank you, ma'am.
This is how the interesting PG projects can be, and I'm very happy that students at PG level are doing such projects at SECON. There are many colleges which are having oceanography and marine science in our area, and I'm sure that students will be motivated after your presentation to take up such projects. And as you are dealing with rocky tide pool, these are somewhat neglected
Yes.
neglected habitats. So yes, this is very much required. This study is having its own importance. So I appreciate the work which you have done and presented over here. All the best. I also would like to mention here that Dr. Aziz, former director from SECON, he has spared his valuable time, and he is also over here in this Google Meet to motivate the speakers and all others who are working in this field. Thank you, Aziz sir, for joining the session. Yeah. Any other participant, you can unmute yourself to comment, or if you have asked any question, you can put your question in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and speak. Yeah, it's open for all the participants. Just we'll wait for a few seconds because it will take little time for students to put their questions in chat box, and I'll also check my personal chat box if any questions are there. Yeah. Kale sir is over here, a very senior professor from zoology, and he has a question for you, Purnima madam.
Yeah.
What has been the research question? Can you please repeat that?
Yeah. So, shall I open the presentation?
Yeah, you can. No problem.
So the questions were, how do the physico-chemical parameters of water and tide pool affect the composition of tide pool biota and their structure? And the second question was, what is the variation in a tide pool composition in low tide zone, mid tide zone, and high tide zone? And the third question was, is there any negative impact of anthropogenic activities on the tide pool biota? So these were the three questions.
Yeah, and I think, madam, you said that regarding third point that you couldn't observe any anthropogenic disturbing influence with reference to statistical proof for that.
Yeah. So the visually there was difference, but I could not prove it statistically. It was not significant. So for that, I think data of at
yeah,
least
I think you need
1 year or
yeah,
long data.
long-term sampling if you carry out, then maybe
Yeah.
that will be truly reflected in that. In one of the photos, madam, you have shown about testing of water parameters. So whatever other parameters you studied, salinity and others. So you carried some instrument for that over there, or
Yeah, for temperature and pH, I used this probe, and salinity I used a refractometer.
okay,
Dissolved oxygen I calculated using Winkler's method, and sodium, calcium, and potassium I calculated using flame photometer.
okay. I thought that if you are having some multi-parameter probe, then
Actually, Goldline sir has one. So it gives all the parameters.
so you have mentioned that the local community, though initially they had certain reservations, later on those girls were friendly with you and
Yeah.
helped you with the sampling. So whenever our students go for field work, this issue is always there, that how the community will take it, how the locals will help. So what are your suggestions in this respect? That in field, how the researcher should behave, how you can develop
I think we should must first meet the all community members, at least the elder persons or serpents of the village, and tell them about our research topic, and then they only guide you to meet this person. He will help you where you have to go. So that's the thing.
Yeah, so I think all young researchers should know that Vishal Rasar sir is appreciating this wonderful study, and yeah, he is asking whether it is similar to sacred forest. Or his second question is that you can refer to chat box. His second question is that what is the temperature you get here, and does species composition change with the temperature? Because you have shown that temperature and pH, they are having some influence on the
Yeah.
diversity over
So the temperature and the gastropods especially has a negative correlation. So with increasing temperature, the number of gastropods abundance was decreased.
Okay. His first question, I didn't follow exactly. He's saying that I am amazed by the fact that some area is reserved as no-go area. It's not like sacred forest. This is not
No.
no-go area.
Anyone can go there.
Anyone can go, but because the local community is probably using it for ladies as a toilet facility, they have reservations. Anybody going in there?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not like no-go area. I would like to ask you, Purnima madam, that how do you plan to take this study further? Have you applied for any other funding or any other project to continue this study?
No. So my
Because this
future
was your
plan-
PhD dissertation, no?
Yeah. So actually, I'm planning to work for my PhD in this topic only. But before that, my plan is to join Indian Forest Service And while during in service, I'm planning to conduct my PhD.
Okay, that's fantastic because you have done your graduation in forestry. So
Yeah.
yeah, that will be a great career. Um, yeah, Professor Dr. Kale sir is giving some important suggestion. Yeah, he's saying not to discourage you, but most of the deductions are logical, uh, and you don't require no great research. But all the best. Yeah, we all can think of the suggestion which is given by Professor Dr. Kale, and I'm sure that you would develop this problem further and study it in details. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. And students will really know how you have selected the study area, what is your methodology, and how you can continue with that research. Any other question from the audience? So, sir, would you
Yeah.
comment? Yeah.
Yes. I would like to add a few of the things. Like Purnima took up this study for a MSc dissertation. It was basically on her insistence that I took up the study of tide pool because, like in the introduction, it was said that she is a swimmer, a sea swimmer, and all, and having had that observations around rocks were something that was not studied much. Yeah, truly in India we have a lot of rocky patches along the shore, and like Dr. Kale also pointed out, that there is nothing needed for research, but then taking that understanding only throughout, these ecosystems have been neglected and not studied. So the basic document has never been there. So at least with this starting, a proper tide pool study has been initiated in India. Like Parulekar, see, the tide pool studies across the globe started somewhere in the 1850s and on. But India, it was lacking. Dr. Bhatt in 1950 studied the rocky shore, but there was no explanation or the details about the tide pool ecosystems or the rocky tide pool ecosystems. And later on, as Purnima pointed out in 1981, Dr. Parulekar mentioned about the rocky tide pools. But if you go to refer in literature, there is hardly about 10 to 12 references that exist on studies, and that are much recent, mostly from 2000s onward, that people have shown some interest. So taking that into consideration, and our oceans and coasts need to be protected. Going by what Vishal was amazed that that there are no-go areas, and Dr. Somani has already clarified that these are actually for public utility and all that. So if these locations across the country are not documented, for their diversity, for a lot of things, like there is a lot of coral species that exist along the coast, along these rocky tide pools. You go along Maharashtra, say you go to Kunkeshwar, you go to Ratnagiri, and all, you will find places where there is diversity of corals also that are growing, and not everybody can go deep sea diving and see corals. They are not very fortunate. So this study, with the documentation of the habitat, helps for long-term, say, understanding of the ecosystem. And in today's time of climate change and all, if we don't have the documentation of certain ecosystems, we'll just lose them out with the climate change scenario that is happening. So every ecosystem needs to be studied, and this Purnima has really underplayed, or rather, not shown her efforts that she has put in to go and sample these ecosystems, which are really rough. You get a tidal cycle of 6 hours time, but for the sampling period, you have to be over there for just 4 hours time. And then studying 3 different zones, the low tide, mid tide, and the high tide, is a Herculean task. And she did not just go to one pool. She has studied something like 9 pools in each of the locations, which is, documenting them, studying the area, and all that is a very major thing to be done. And I would really appreciate what she has done, and
Yes.
good work, and more and more people should get in, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Golden sir, for elaborating
Yeah.
more about the project carried out by Purnima at the PG level. Professor Dr. Kale has commented that
Yeah.
For PG study, it was all right, but extending, yes, I'm sure that Purnima will be planning for more efforts
Yeah.
for her PhD. Yeah. So,
Yeah, sure,
uh,
sure, sir. We have many more things that we have planned, and we have actually documented the tide pools across Maharashtra after taking Purnima studies as the baseline study. So we have got the GIS locations marked right from the northern part of Maharashtra till the southern part of Maharashtra, and we plan to do it for the entire country also. So your suggestions are well taken. Sure, definitely.
yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Can I talk a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Mohita madam, your work is fantastic. Though so many have, Kai sir has and Goli sir has already said it, it's a preliminary work.
Yeah.
Because in your talk you said about effect of temperature pH on the diversity which affects the gastropods. I think there is, as even Kai sir has elaborated, there is much work to be done on the physiological and adaptation behaviors. Because I had been
Yes.
working in a related area for my PhD also. So, are there any? Because I know, as Guli sir said, that there is very little work or no work basically done with respect to ecophysiology of these intertidal organisms. Neither in fishes, neither in invertebrates. There is very less work. So, wouldn't it be possible for you to incorporate some parameters to understand like what kind of responses these organisms are showing physiologically, so that there are some organisms which are sensitive, there are some organisms which are
Yeah.
quite tolerant, uri-aligned or eurythermic animals, which will be saying maybe they will be moving away. So, some kind of behavioral observations have you seen or you try to incorporate in your thesis or your work?
Yeah, in future, I will try to incorporate the biological parameters like predation, grazing, and their adaptation. But during my dissertation, only 3 months time was there, and after March, the lockdown was there. So many of the parameters, actually, I had collected samples for zooplankton and phytoplankton. But after the lockdown, the lab was closed, so I could not identify those samples. So many of the parameters I could not include. So very less were included.
Especially we rely more on the data that we get from other countries, especially temperate water countries.
Yeah. So New
Tropical water
Zealand,
countries, especially larval distribution, larval survival, how temperature, especially when we talk of
yeah,
global warming, ocean acidification, their distribution, their settlement, their growth. I don't know what kind of permissions are required for this. Goldin sir can just elaborate. Like if you want to study on some intertidal organisms, collect those organisms which are commonly available or sold in the market also. For example, crabs or maybe oysters or clams. So, what kind of permissions are required for conducting such studies? If I want, maybe, or if any
See-
students want to
Yeah,
conduct
see,
this.
for this we still require Forest Department's permission, and per species they will allow you only to collect 6 specimens, and permissions take time to come. So if it is like benthos, that is macrobenthos, if the samples come in that, then as of now we don't require permissions. But if it is a megafauna, definitely whatever you catch, whether it's fish, whether it's edible fish or non-edible fish, for every scientific study you require permissions from the Forest Department, from the State Biodiversity Board as well. So that is a long, tedious process which you have to apply through the Forest Department to the Biodiversity Board, and then the permissions come, and then you start your experiments if you want to collect the samples live and use those in your laboratory for further process and all that. So that happens. That is same for whether it is the forest species or the coastal species as such. Yeah.
Even if it is an invertebrate or which is
Yeah.
common
Pardon? Like?
even if it's a common species which has been exploited by the local fishermen.
Yeah.
For
See, the
example,
local
winter shrimps they will collect maybe clams, oysters.
See, for scientists, there are a lot of restrictions. For scientific research, there are a lot of restrictions. But if the local is consuming it, it is his livelihood, it is his food. So, there are no restrictions over there. But otherwise, all this comes into picture. That is the thing. Because you are studying it. For what purpose and all that all comes in, and how much are you going to take? Then the sustainability issues, factors come in. That is something that we have to still grow out, and grow up, like, where we are applying what rules at what level, like. That happens.
Yeah.
So in Purnima's case also, we could not see her study duration was further shortened because of the COVID thing that just came. So somehow, she could do a lot of things because she stayed over there, and the Dakole College also, from where she did her graduation, helped a lot. They provided her the lab facility even during the COVID time. But then there were restrictions as to when she goes, what she does. So with all those time limitations and all, it had to be done. The same thing with the permissions or otherwise like that.
Yeah. I think Purnima can also undergo some training if she wants to take it further, because we have many students who are having marine oceanography background, whereas she is from forestry background. So doing plankton analysis or benthos may be a little challenging for her. And if she wants to take it further, she will undergo some training in taxonomy or other things. Yes. Yeah, but
Future plans.
very interesting. Interesting. Okay, so I think any other question over here? Yeah, and I think this is the best part of our Women of Matter Talk series, where we can have together the senior researchers and the young researchers, and we all together can have some interaction, and all other student community is motivated because of that. So the purpose is served over here. Thank you so much for interaction. As there are no further questions, I'll request Dr. Rishikesh Dalvi sir to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, madam. I hope I am audible to all of you. So on behalf
Yes.
of Department of Zoology and Varshidananda College of Arts, Science and Commerce, I, Dr. Rishikesh Dalvi, thank you, Ms. Purnima Mohite, for sharing your experiences and knowledge on the rocky tidal pool ecosystem, and also elaborating on her work on Passpandari Shore. I thank you, our Vice President of MBS, Ms. Kamal Verma, for providing the necessary facilities, and Principal Madam, Dr. Chaya Pandse, for being a constant support for conducting such programs. I also thank Dr. Goldin Quadras sir for being an encouragement, and SciCon for collaboration for such program. I also thank you, my departmental colleagues, HOD Madam, Dr. of Zoology, Dr. Vaishali Somani Madam, Ms. Suprita Naik, for their consistent support for conducting such programs. I thank you all the participants who have participated from across the nation, teachers from the Mumbai University, and also members of SciCon for their presence. I take this opportunity also to thank Mr. Ayyappan Pillai and his team for their technical support. Last but not the least, I also thank you all the enthusiastic student participation for participating in today's program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We can end the meeting over here, and tomorrow let us meet for next session in this series.